All right. We are back. Everybody ready for the last Whip Wednesday ever? Guess I didn't tell anyone about it, but this is going to be the last one. I promise. It's good to see you, Lenny. Alessandro is also in the chat. I'll switch on the camera in just a second. Hello, Pooty. Generic man says, hey, what do you mean by ever? Let me explain. It is gonna be the last Whip Wednesday ever. Unfortunately. I'll explain more about it in just a second. Hold on, let me make sure. Oh my god, because time changes and all that kind of stuff. Oh. Okay, let me make sure that the announcement goes out. Summertime, yeah. Let's see. I think that should be good. Let me add one manually. Live streams, blah blah blah. Oh, I guess streams. Yeah, let's do that one. Nicoletta is saying this is the first one and the last one? What? Okay, let me switch on the camera. Let me explain. Look at the date. Look at your calendars and have a look at the date. It is fucking 1st of April, so it's just a stupid gag. Of course I'm not gonna give this up. Oh my god. I'm gonna be here for a long time. Sorry, like every year. Okay, let me explain. So every year what I want to do is I want to do like a very funny gag, like maybe switching around like people's names on Discord or something like that. And every year, I swear, it gets really busy. I completely forget that it's the 1st of April and that I never do a gag. So it's like, I guess this is my sad attempt at having fun. Oh well. No, so it's not going to be the last one. We are definitely going to continue doing this. So it's all good, nothing to worry about. Maybe it's time to give a mod the Joker role for April's Fools. One of the things that I actually had in mind, and then never did because I realized that it was going to be freaking chaos. Well, no, there's ways around it. But I had the idea of changing everyone's name on Discord to the same name with the same profile image. But I don't think I can. I don't think I can change the profile image actually. But I can change everyone's name. So, yeah, I was thinking about that. But then I never did. Where the fuck's my drink? Oh, there it is. Oh, I guess I shouldn't be swearing on stream. Apologies. Yeah, it's good to see you here, Nicoletta. I'm making a blockout and preparing for a marathon this week. Oh, dang. Freaking going all out. In April's Fool's Day? You got me? Probably the only person. The rest was just like, oh my god. Just so dumb. Stop it. Hello, Mike. Good to see you. Good to see you all. But yeah, God, I've been doing this week feels weird. Yesterday, I did a stream for 4 hours, I think, from my previous school as well. So yeah, it feels weird to be back again, and then we're gonna be back again on Friday. It feels like this week is just gonna be like stream central. Yeah. I had a lot of fun yesterday, though. So, for context, myself and a former, well, no, like like a fellow alumni from the school. We sat together and basically gave I think 10 students like a bunch of feedback from like a course that they were doing. It was their first introduction to to basically environment art and like level design and like all that kind of stuff. I would actually love to show you some examples because I think the quality bar is pretty high even for their first environment, right? So let me show off a couple of ones. A couple ones that we liked. Let's see. Where can I find them again? Oh yeah, Discord. Let's go. Yeah, it was pretty fun. I had a good time. It was pretty long, but I think it was very fruitful. Yeah, it's always fun to help people out, to share a bunch of feedback. I had a lot of fun in doing so. Let me just pick like a couple of random ones. Hey, hello, see ya. Good to see ya. Let me show off like a couple of examples, right? From people that so for context, this is the school that I graduated from. These are people in the second year doing their first module into environment art, right? Just to set the stage a little bit. And then we're gonna start with the winner because there's like a mini event happening. So the teacher from the course, he basically organized this challenge basically where he gives like he makes his own trophies and he gives like the winner of like the jury basically a little trophy, which is kind of cool. Let me show it off though. Let me give you a peek. So this was the winner, right? So this was a top vote from the jury and from all the people that could vote. I think it was like student votes as well. I think they all combined somehow. I don't know how, but yeah, there was some really cool stuff on display. Yeah, and you know, and this is Environments 1 class, right? I don't know how it works now. I think they've already seen like a bunch of let me see. I think they've seen a bunch of modeling. They've done high poly modeling, low poly modeling. They've had a couple of introductions to texturing. And I think this is their first time doing modularity, right? So that's what we're seeing now. And it was really cool to have a look at what they were producing and to see how they made the most out of it with like just a couple of simple little things here and there. I mean, I call them simple, but like for your first introduction to like modularity, this is like pretty impressive to look at. Yeah, it really showcases like this is like a very small kit, right? And to then be able to build something like this with like multiple rooms and all that kind of stuff with it, pretty impressive. So, job well done. And then some people went all out with like an animation and some VFX and all that kind of stuff on top of it, and I had a lot of fun with it. I had so much fun with this stuff too. It's really cool. Yeah, there was some really cool stuff on display. So pretty impressed with all the stuff that they're doing already. Just a couple more examples. Yeah, we spent like a whole time talking about what makes a good modular environment, right? And there were like a couple of I'll share like a couple of common things that we both talked about. One thing is, and this is a fundamental skill, right? Noise and using contrast effectively, right? So there's a bunch of principles that are packed into it. For example, you can tell from some of these people that we're looking at, it just becomes really difficult to know where I need to go with my eyeballs because everything is just so dense with stuff, right? Obviously, for certain thematics, like let's say a Warhammer environment, you kind of want that sort of density, but then you need to find another way to tone down the density, right? So maybe less light and more intense light around like the thing that you want to focus on. So that was one big thing. Obviously, there was a bunch of surface level stuff where it's like, oh, we need to improve your material work, um, some of those things. But I think for the fundamental things, for the fundamental feedback that we gave, it was definitely paying attention to the amount of noise. The other thing is, and you're gonna see this coming from a mile away, is story, right? I think the people that I picked, maybe apart from this one, most of them, they had like a good story in mind, right? You can tell just looking at the environment that they have a story, and that they try to execute upon that story, right? Which is really cool. Compared to like a steel mill, I mean, this is not the worst example out of the bunch, but like a steel mill is like a location, right? Like what happens in the steel mill? Like what happens there? What do they do, right? And it can be logically based, but then show me more of the process, right? I think let me see. There was another example. Let's see. Yeah, so for example, this, right? This is a good example. It's a decent showcase of what modularity can be, but what is this place, right? Like, what is it supposed to be doing? Like, it's very shallow when it comes to the storytelling. Like, I don't really know what's happening here, and that is honestly crucial to everything, right? Because I beat you guys over the head with the stick like constantly, right? Like a story can form the foundations and the anchor for everything you do on top of it, right? So that means that let me see, there was another person here. Let me see if I can find them. No, that's the same one. Ah, cool. Okay, Leonard already listened to our feedback. That's awesome. Let me see. Chamber. Oh, I don't think I can find like the one that we actually talked about. Or I'm just like misclicking. This is a steel mill. By the way. But yeah, so story was a big one. That was definitely at the core of it, right? It's like, for example, like this, like have a focal point that is like a drill or a laser or a big weapon or something like that, right? Because this is just like a generic vat of stuff. I don't know what the stuff is supposed to do, right? So that can be added in here. This scored really good points when it comes to lighting and the color grading. I really liked like how everything was balanced. Had like a very good feel to it. Beauty is asking, is it made by one person, and is it the first environment ever made for them? Yes on both accounts. So it is made by one person. I don't know how long they have. Yeah, I don't know how long they have specifically, but it's made by one person, and for the majority of people, I think for all the people, it's their first environment that they make. And again, it's a really good showcase. Some people showcase it off really well, right? Like if you scroll down and they just show you like, hey, these are the blocks that I used in my level. That's it. It's like 15 assets, right? And you can build like a whole level out of it, which is cool, right? Like it's a great introduction to modularity. And same thing here, right? Like, oh, no breakdowns. Let me see if I can find another example. If you scroll down. See like the amount of assets here on display? There's not too many of them, right? Like this is not an intimidating amount of assets to make like a whole environment with multiple spaces, multiple areas, and multiple corridors and all that kind of stuff, right? But yeah, it's cool. I really had a lot of fun. So yeah, what was there in terms of like additional feedback? So we talked about like noise, right? That was the first one. We talked about storytelling, which is a big one for me personally. There was the readability in general. That most of the time when we talked about readability in regards to what they were doing, it's readability of the materials, right? If something metal, then it reads like metal. If something's not metal, it needs to read differently, right? Let me think. What else did we talk about? Yeah, we did talk a lot about the fundamentals, which was good. Oh, generic man, that's a good question. So it can be quite hard to force a story into a place where you don't really need one, right? Does every environment need a story? I would argue that if you're not telling a story through your art, you are missing a massive opportunity to do something more with your environment, right? Because you can make something look functional, right? For example, I don't know, just picking something out of the air, right? Like let's say coal mine, right? And you make that coal mine like really functional. And you make with functional, what I mean is that you see the delivery of the people coming in, and you see where the coal goes out, and there is like a connection happening there, and it all feels really functional, right? So it feels like a real place. Now, what do we do in games, right? If you can go into that mine, the thing that usually keeps people is because it has a story in there, right? It adds like this additional layer that keeps people invested, right? Like there was a mine collapse and my husband is like stuck in the mine. Please go and rescue them, right? That's the stuff that is like the emotional thing that has you going to that mine, right? And especially, and this is what I said yesterday as well, is if you make something that has a story, because let's zoom out, right? So there you are right in the sense that the majority that you will be doing as a junior especially is making pretty generic stuff, right? With generic stuff, I mean you will be set dressing just like, oh, this is just like a hermit's thing because it just those are the assets that I have available, right? So you will be doing a bunch of generic stuff. But that's not what you want to showcase in your portfolio. You need to showcase in your portfolio the stuff that you want to be doing, right? And the thing that potentially no one else is doing. Because I would even argue that a lot of people online can make like really good looking stuff, but a lot of people can't tell a convincing story. And as an environment artist, that is going to be more impactful to your work. So I would always start out with a story. Always. It's also, once you get into it, it makes your life so much easier because that story is going to give you something to think about, right? So yeah, it will give you an anchor to make the rest of your scene on top of it. Honestly, it's going to save you so much time. Because you know what? This steel mill, it looks okay, but it's lacking something, right? It's just a generic steel mill. There's nothing really exciting about that, right? And sometimes it can also be just, the story can also just be something like this, right? Where the location itself is a research facility and what it's researching is like old dino fossils, right? That is a story. So, yeah. Oh, did we double ping people? Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Let me delete the last one. Oh. Thank you, Miguel. Hello, hello. Good to see you. Hello, Marius. Yeah, it was really fun hanging out with them yesterday. Really, really cool to see like all the work. They're doing a fantastic job at it. And then yeah, Carlo here ran away with the winner of the vote. So yeah, congratulations to them again. But yeah, Lily saying that's crazy. Yeah. I mean, the bar is pretty high, right? It is kind of crazy. Let's switch back. We're just gonna keep yapping for a bit, and then I'll go into with Wednesday. So let's switch it on back. For people that are new here, this is basically my weekly event where I talk to all of you beautiful people, and then also we'll jump into some feedback in just a second. So people from the community can basically put their work up every week, and I'll give them feedback if they want to. So if you have any questions about environment art, game art, all that kind of good stuff, let me know and we can talk about it. Shirka is leading by example. So Shirka is saying, I've kind of stepped into the industry through a game art course. Right now I'm dealing with texture sets, textile density, and baking, and honestly my brain feels like it's about to explode. Oh yeah, buddy. There is a lot of stuff to do in game art. You know, it is technically like pretty complex when it comes to creating anything in 3D. I think in the 3D field, I would make the argument that like making game art is probably the most complex by far. Because the other industries like VFX doesn't need to care about like real-time performance. So they just don't, right? Where we have to care about all that stuff. What I would do, my advice there, you know, I don't know if you were looking for it or not, but I'll give it free of charge, is don't try to focus on everything all at once. Take it step by step, right? When it comes to your intake of knowledge, there's two types of knowledge there's two ways of consuming knowledge. There's need to know knowledge and there's want to know knowledge. What I would focus most of your time on is need to know knowledge. That means that in the moment you're doing things, oh shit, I don't know how to do this thing, I'm gonna look up a tutorial. The other option is always looking at tutorials, even when it's not relevant to your work right now, because you think it might be relevant in the future. I can guarantee you that you're going to be circling back on that anyway. So basically it comes down to like wasting a bunch of time. But yeah, compartmentalize on like one skill. Let's say you're learning about texture sets. Do the smallest possible thing that you can do to try and get around the concept of texture sets, you know? So yeah, really try to compartmentalize those things in the smallest possible thing. Do you know why ZBrush is so damn expensive compared to most other softwares? How expensive is ZBrush? I have no idea. ZBrush, buy. Where is ZBrush? 40 a month? Yeah. 400 a year? Yeah. I mean, compared to other programs, it might be more expensive, but also if you think about it, they are still the standards, right? And that's what you're paying for. That's usually what it comes down to. By the way, I do all my sculpting in Blender, right? Yeah, I mean, Megval, that is also a point, right? Like, they are still the standard, right? Because Blender is good, but I think it is not widely used specifically for sculpting in the industry yet, right? So that's where you still need to go through using ZBrush and all that kind of stuff. They have been making some pretty interesting improvements, especially when it comes to UI, making it more usable and all that kind of stuff, which is good. So I think they want to solidify their place in that position. Which feels like it's a long time coming, honestly. They should have done something about that UI like ages ago. But yeah, just because they can. 100%. But yeah, compared to most other softwares, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's weird now living in the subscription age, right? Because before Adobe Illustrator, I remember back in the day when I was looking at it, was like 4,000 for like a yearly license, right? I mean, you had it, and then maybe you wanted to upgrade to the next version, then you needed to pay like another 4,000, you know? So you could do that every year if you wanted to. But now I think that costs like 40 a month, right? And then you have access to like the whole suite. I don't know if it's 40 or whatever, because I don't use it anymore. But yeah, I think honestly, I wouldn't look at that price. I would look at what the tools can learn, or like what the tools can teach you, right? And if you are strapped for cash, or you don't find another way of getting ZBrush, then just use Blender, honestly. I think especially when we're talking about environment art specifically, right? A lot of the tools that you're gonna want to use in ZBrush, you are most likely not even gonna touch as an environment artist, I would say. And if you do, it's probably not worth the price. But that's my opinion. I am very, very specific with how I spend my money, so. How expensive is it? The answer is yes. It is actually not that expensive. I know it sounds crazy. Is there like a student plan? Let me have a look. I guess that's the only thing that kind of sucks, right? No, education. Right. So there are educational prices. So if you are a student, right, and there's probably gonna be, yeah, at accredited universities and colleges and all that kind of stuff, you pay 70 a year, right? So that is pretty affordable if you are a student. However, if you are a professional, right, and then you have to pay like 55 a month, you have to think about it in this way, right? That professional license is probably built for people that are going to be making money from it, right? Because if you're going to work for a company, then you have it. You just have it for the company, right? Because the company needs to provide you for that. So I always look at it through the lens of, let's say you are like a freelancer and then you need to pay like 50 a month. Let's say you are like a character artist in this case, right? That is really cheap. That is really cheap. It's just not for people that don't have a lot of money or are students, right? Generic Man is asking, do I need to be an environment artist to be a prop to be sorry, do I need to be do I need to be a prop artist to be an environment artist? Oh my god. To a certain degree, yes. Because the pipeline of game art always goes through props. It is very difficult to not do props and just do environment. I think it is way easier to just do the prop pipeline, high to low poly baking, texturing, all that kind of stuff on one asset. And then you know how all the technical stuff works so that you can then go and apply it to other things, right? Like, oh, now I just bake to a plane and I make a tileable texture, or I bake like a trim sheet. Okay. But it all goes through like the same pipeline of like props, right? However, the difference there is if you specialize on props, you need to have a higher quality standard when it comes to props. If you look at like my work, for example, if you go to my ArtStation, I'm not a prop guy. I try to skirt by as much as I can when it comes to props because I don't care. I care about the big picture, right? And that is the thing that makes me an environment artist. So in short, your level of prop quality doesn't need to be at the same level as a prop artist's quality, right? But it still needs to be serviceable for the stuff that you need to make. But that's a good question, though. I like it. Honestly, Maxon should have bought ZBrush Pixologic. Shouldn't have bought ZBrush. They were a way less aggressive company. I mean, look, there's a lot of people that still have like the perpetual license from back in the day where you paid like 700 euros and you had like ZBrush forever with all the updates and all that kind of stuff, right? I don't know if they're still honoring that, but that was their business for the long time, right? So it kind of makes sense that there was a company that came in and then bought them, right? Here's always a thing that I think about when people say they bought the company, right? It's a trade, right? Always think about it this way. Pixologic had a say in being bought out, right? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Do you have any tips for or recommendations for sculpting in Blender and managing dense meshes? I honestly have never had issues with dense meshes. Like, straight up. Maybe I'm doing something right, I guess. But for example, well, okay, I have a lot of individually dense meshes. That's when I say that, that's when I refer to my trim sheet, right? So I have a scene where I sculpt my trim sheet, and that scene is like 150 million polygons in Blender, and it runs smooth. I've even sculpted on stream, you know, and that is with like OBS and all that kind of stuff coming into play as well. So I have no idea. Like, if you want to have some general advice, if you're dealing with like very dense meshes, try to find a way to either split them up, or if that is not an option, you would probably need to look at dynamic topology to kind of save you a bunch of resources on the areas that you're not sculpting, right? Because what can save you a bunch of resources is that not everything needs to be super dense. So dynamic topology can actually help you save on resources in that way, and hopefully help you out too. What subcategory of an environment artist are you? What's the bulk of your professional work? I would say I would call myself a level artist primarily. So I'm not really doing technical work on a professional level, right? Even though I can do a lot of technical stuff, I know how PGZ works. I know how modular kits work. I know some scripting. I know GeoNodes. I know all that kind of stuff, but I don't use that in a professional capacity. What I do on a professional capacity is most of the time set dressing, and then on top of that, like a lot of modular work as well. So yeah, modular kits. I'm gonna keep it very vague, but like modular kits and some architectural stuff. You know, like the big kind of stuff. So I don't care about like all the props. Usually in AAA that gets outsourced anyway. But that's what I do. I'm hopefully I can talk about it more once the game releases. Would be cool to kind of give you a tour of some of the stuff that I worked on. Yeah. Because we have like an in-house engine, right? So our tool set is completely different to what you would expect from Unreal Engine, for example. We have some really cool internal tools that I probably will never be able to talk about, but there's some pretty cool stuff that they have. Maddie is saying I'm stuck on ZBrush 2022 when the full licenses. I don't really want to subscribe per month. Oh yeah. Same here. I don't really care too much about subscriptions. I don't have like Adobe or anything like that. I used Affinity. Affinity is now free, which is amazing. I've been using Blender for like 5 or 6 years, and I do everything in Blender, and then I use Unreal on top of it. Yeah, so I'm pretty lean when it comes to the workflow that I use. All of it is free, and that's the way that I like it. Yeah. Let's see. Michael Mancho is saying, I just had a whole Substance Designer tutorial lesson. Awesome. So yeah, in terms of subcategory, Marius, you could probably identify me with like, let's say a level artist / environment artist, you know? Or I guess some companies also call them world builders as well. It kind of depends on where you go. Generic Man is saying, thank you. Mastering the fundamental software can be a bit exhausting, and I always find myself just wanting to make art look good from afar. Having to go detailed for each asset is really hard. Well, here's the thing, right? Like, you still have to go detailed, but that detailed means something else when it comes to what you're doing, right? For example, there is still an expectation of, let's say we go with like a story scene, right? Like you have a beautiful scene with a story. The main object in that story, you still want to make that yourself so that you can showcase that you can do the hard surface work. Not the hard surface work, but like the prop work, and showcase that off too. Then for the rest of it, you still need to make it look really good, but yeah, you need to do that through like different methods, right? That means using a tileable as a base and then doing vertex paint on top of it, or RGB masking, or trim sheets, or whatever you need to do, right? But it still needs to look good. Because here's the thing, right, Generic Man? Think about what you're going to be building the environment for, right? People are still going to be playing the game. They're going to be putting their noses into like close up to all the stuff that you create. So it still needs to look good. It still needs to look juicy. Reverse 6 is saying, I use Blender for modeling, but maybe I should learn Maya or 3ds Max basics, not to narrow my options in the UK. Everything's expensive though. No, you shouldn't. You should not. Straight up not, actually. So what the reason why I say that, and I say that so confidently, is because Maya, Max, and Blender, they're just tools. You know? What you want to get out of the tools is you want to know how to model, and you want to know how to like model relatively complex things. You need to know how to make use of, like, let's say your modifier stack, right? Or I don't know, maybe like a little bit of an introduction to GeoNodes. I think that's like very optional. But like knowing how to model, knowing how to use an array, using like a bend, I don't know, like an FFD modifier, and like some of those like basic modeling techniques, soft selection, how to make like good curves, all those kind of things. That doesn't matter whether you use Maya, 3ds Max or not. I'll give you an example from my career, right? I started out in uni using only Max. I got my first job. I needed to switch to Maya for my first job. I did that in like a couple of weeks or like a month or something like that. Then for my second job, I had to switch back to Max. Then when I was at my second job, I started to learn Blender. And then in my third job, I switched to Blender with a combination of Max on top of it as well. The buttons are just somewhere else, but the techniques remain the same. Right? So whenever I now need to switch to, let's say, Maya, for example, I will just look up like, oh, this is what I do in Blender. Okay, how does that work in Maya? And then sure, like it takes me a while to get back into it, right? But yeah, in general, what you want to do, and I this is actually a point that I brought up yesterday in the live stream as well for the students from my former school. You don't want to side skill. You want to upskill. So what that means is whenever you switch from, like, let's say Maya to 3ds Max, that is a side skill. You're not really gaining anything from that, right? Because the output or the outcome of you switching to a different modeling package is still the same. You are still just going to export an FBX and there's no change, right? So instead of spending a bunch of time trying to switch there, I would honestly just try to find a skill that you haven't gotten good at yet or haven't started learning yet and spend more time into that, because that's actually going to have like a multiplier on top of your skill set already. Yeah. Took me only 3 days to switch from Max to Maya. I honestly tried Blender, but I feel better with Maya at the moment. So at the moment I'm staying with Maya. Yeah. And that's totally fine, right? That is totally fine. It is just a tool. And the thing there is, you also don't know what company you will be joining, which means that, let's say Reverse E6, you will switch to Max, right? Because that would be the logical bet according to the data, right? Like most of the games industry probably uses Max or is switching to Blender. But let's say you switch to Max. And then you end up at a company that doesn't use Max. Now you spend all this time learning a tool that you're not even going to use in a professional setting, right? So I would honestly just stick with what you know and then switch whenever the industry asks you to switch. That's what I would do. Marius is asking, how did you get into level art? I think this is a good question because you're saying it feels like it's an experienced job and not a beginner one. Yes, we also talked about this in last stream, I think last Friday, I think. Because honestly, you can't really get a job as a level artist. You will get a job as an environment artist, and then if you're really good at storytelling, you will probably be doing more of that stuff, right? The reason why I say that is, technically, if you wanted to build a portfolio for level art specifically, right? So let's say that's the only thing that you care about. The best way to do that is to look at what Unreal Engine puts out in terms of like free asset packs and make it look really cool and tell a story through that, right? That could work. The only issue there is that the industry doesn't want only level artists. They want to have people that can also model and texture and all that kind of stuff on top of it as well, right? So that's why, like, as an entry point, level artist doesn't really exist. You have to just be more generic. So let's say environment art, and then you can. It's not even specialized because it kind of feels like that is very game dependent, right? And I've worked on like open world games for like a lot of my career, So that means that you have like X amount of people, but you have X amount of square kilometers that need to be filled with content, right? So then you just become a level artist because that's what the game needs. So yeah, because let's say if you are joining, let's say Naughty Dog, right? And you're gonna work on Last of Us. I don't know, Last of Us 6, let's say. Level art will probably not even be on the table because everything is pretty linear. So you will be doing set dressing and stuff, right? But that will be, I don't know, a smaller percentage of your time compared to doing like a AAA, like, well, not a AAA, but like an open world production. So that's also important to take into account. Wimes is saying, I've actually been wanting to learn some GeoNodes. Do you have any advice on how to start out? That's a good question. Starting out with GeoNodes is I would do something that scatters something. I know that sounds really generic, but that is probably the best thing to do in the beginning. How did I start out? What was the first thing that I built in GeoNodes? I think the first thing that I built when GeoNodes came out is I replaced the tool that I've built for myself to generate foliage. So what I mean by that is, I realize that I'm saying that a lot. Oh my god, I clicked in my head. But I was using particle effects for the longest time to generate like foliage, right? So that means that I have like a bunch of like individual things, and then I use particle effects to make like plants and clusters of foliage. I replaced that with geometry nodes. So that was my entry into it, and then I started using it for scattering rooftops, right? So I had like all these medieval rooftops with individual shingles. I started using it for that. And I think those things are like perfect as a base. When does your mentorship open up? How does it work and how long does it last? Currently, I'm not planning to open any new individual mentorships anymore because we are working hard on our own online academy. And with the goal of that is that in a couple of months, I will be doing group lessons instead as a start. I want to start there, and then maybe after that, I'll open up like individual mentorships. But that's going to be like at least a couple of months. So unfortunately, don't expect my individual mentorships to open up at this given point. Yeah, unfortunately. There are other options though. Like I think Vessel Forge is pretty good. I don't know what the pricing of their mentorships is. I think they're pretty good. Jeremy from Dynasty also does occasional mentorships. I don't know if he has open spots, but that's also a person that I can recommend too. So reach out to those people. How do you progress in the industry? You started as a junior, and as you said, you do set dressing. At what point did something change and you started working on something else? No, actually, as a junior, I didn't start with set dressing. In the beginning, I was working for Planet Coaster, and majority of my time, no, all my time, I was making assets. Like 100% of my time was dedicated to asset creation. Yes. So I'll show you some stuff, right, from like my early career. If we switch it up. So if we go like all the way back here, this is some of the earlier stuff that I did. This is just like all individual modular pieces that we then give to the players of our game, and they could build like the whole worlds with them, right? So they built all this stuff. I think these were some like example levels that someone else built. But yeah, that's where I started, right? And you can see, same thing here. So just like a bunch of assets that then people can use. These were all set up in a specific way so that you can color them in any color that you want. But this was all like very traditional high to low poly baking. You know, sometimes I would sculpt stuff. Sometimes I would also get the opportunity, for example, the thatch. I mean, I look at it now and it's kind of like, ugh, I could do way better now. But back then, what I was doing, I was using fiber mesh. because I always loved experimenting with new techniques, and this was made in fiber mesh in ZBrush. So I had little planes that I laid out on like a UV sheet, and I would then grow hair from them, and I made that hair like really thick, sort of like thatch. And this is gonna sound so weird, I would then groom it into place. So I was literally brushing thatch to kind of get into like a certain shape. I would then bake that down, and then I would use that as my low poly textures here. It's pretty fun to do. Looks like a really fun project. It was. And then I think this was really challenging. You can still see I added like a bunch of high poly stuff here. But yeah, this was all just like modeled, then baked down, and then like textured in Dedo and Endo, Quixel Suite back then. So a lot of my early career was actually like modeling, you know? And then the interesting switch happened here. So I went from doing individual assets to doing my first coaster, just to get like experience grooming Thatch's peak use of free will. I had a lot of fun doing it, actually. SRPT, hello from Turkey. Hello. Good to see you here. But I was saying, so we went from doing individual assets to doing like a coaster. This was more of a technical setup, which was pretty interesting. And I think at that point, what they realized is that I loved experimenting with new things. And then they threw me on like buildings. So like building modular kits completely from scratch by myself at that point. Keep in mind, at this point, I had no clue what a trim sheet was. I learned it by doing it, and I thought I was being smart. It turned out that it was actually like a pretty basic thing that a lot of people were already doing at that point. So yeah, that was a bit embarrassing to realize that after the fact, but hey. So yeah, I built like these modular kits. And then I kind of went back into a mixture of things. So these were like modular kits, and then also like modular assets too. So people can build like their own snakes and like color them in whatever kind of color they want and build like these big like temples. Let's see, what was the next big switch? Because even on Jurassic World Evolution, I did a lot of architecture stuff, right? So it was a bit more complex and a lot more intense when it comes to the workflow, right? Oh, I had a lot of fun with these guys. It was so fun. But I think the big switch then to actually becoming more of a level artist was when I jumped over to Ubisoft and then joined Far Cry, right? With Far Cry, it was all just, most of it was just literally taking pre-existing stuff that was going to get made by like outsource and then trying to build like the best and the coolest shit that you could do with it, right? And that was my first introduction to level art as a thing. It was also my first introduction to level design and what that meant in a AAA setting, which was big because now before that, I didn't even realize that there was such a thing as level design. Sounds stupid, but that's the thing. I didn't realize it at that point. And when I joined Ubisoft, it opened my eyes that there was like a person that was building out the gameplay space before I then needed to make it pretty, which was really cool. And I really loved that collaboration. But a lot of the work here is just set dressing and like terrain painting and biome painting and, you know, like making sure that the world feels like it's an actual world and not an arena, and telling a story together with the narrative designer. Yeah, all through environment art. That was the biggest switch. And from that switch, once I joined Ubisoft, that's all I've been doing in the rest of my career. It's currently a combination of modeling, a lot of my own like architectural kits and modular kits, right? Like taking from the experience that I got from like early in my career, and then combining that with the experience that I built up at like Ubisoft by like doing all the environmental storytelling and stuff too. So yeah, just a quick overview. I think, but the biggest switch happened when I left Frontier Developments and I joined Ubisoft. That was the biggest switch by far. Yeah. That's a good question though. Hmm. But yeah, let's see. So you start as a junior. Oh yeah, yeah. How did I progress? So let me think. So I think here I was junior still. Like throughout the development of Planet Coaster and all the DLCs that came after. And then maybe on Jurassic World I became intermediate, I think. And then as intermediate I moved over to like Ubisoft. And then at Ubisoft I became senior with the potential to becoming lead, but then I decided that my path was going to be somewhere else, and then I joined Playgrounds instead. I mean, very, very optimized version of that story, but yeah. If location is a major obstacle to becoming an environment artist, would you suggest relocating for educational opportunities and then find a job? Or could you do an online mentorship be enough to begin? The only thing that matters really is your skill level, right? If you are good enough, to get hired, right, and if they really want you, I don't think location plays that big of a difference. Of course, there's a lot of regions where it's probably going to be more difficult to hire from. But yeah, I don't really know because I've always had to move for my job, right? And that has become like increasingly more difficult with sort of like more isolationist policies across the world, right? I mean, very political. We're not going to get into that. But let's say Brexit, for example, right? Makes it more difficult for you as a student to go into Brexit if you're not already living there. But what I would do, I don't know if I would relocate for educational opportunities and then find a job. I don't know. I am probably not the best person to ask that. That is probably a very, very personal decision to make. But definitely an online mentorship, I can definitely advise on getting those because for a lot of people, they were literally the way to get into the industry. 100%. Hey, hey, user, it's not there? What is not there? Me? Huh? Arvid is asking maybe an odd question, but what was like the time span of one of those projects? That's a good question. So, Planet Coaster had a really quick turnaround. I think I joined Planet Coaster, and a year after that, I shipped my first project. I think, or like a year and a half, or something like that. And then all the DLC. God, all the DLC. We did like small DLC and then big DLC, right? Small DLC was like a couple of months. Big DLC was like maybe less than a year or something like that. I can't remember. We did a lot of stuff, like in a short amount of time. It's actually pretty cool. So all the Planet Coaster stuff was I think done in 2 years, right? And that is the base game, and then like 3 smaller updates and 2 big DLCs. But it was all in like really quick succession. And then we did. Oh no, it's not even 2 years because yeah, I spent. So I worked there for 2.5 years, and then I worked on 3 projects during that time, and we shipped 2 of them. And then for Planet Zoo, I kind of left as that was kicking off. Yeah. Yeah, so that was a lot of stuff in like a short amount of time, like 2.5 years for like 3 projects. Oh my god, that is like unheard of now. Because then on Far Cry, I think I spent like 2.5 years on one project, and then 2 years on a year and a half. I think I'm making like really rough estimations now, right? But I think a year and a half or like a year on a project that then unfortunately got cancelled. And then yeah, now I've been working at Playground Games for like 2 years on like one project too, right? So it's been pretty long, but that's what it takes, right? Like these big games and the ambition and just like the quality of the art and how it needs to look. It is so the quality bar is so high now that you need to invest that time, right? Hopefully there wasn't too much stress. There was, but in like a good way. I honestly enjoyed all the work that we had to do on Planet Coaster because it was such a fun project to work on. I think honestly, when it comes to the reason why I like it so much is because we had a direct connection with the community. We made stuff and then we put it out, and then you saw people building with it. Like, it was magical. Like, I cannot even explain it compared to all the other games that I've done. They are valuable in different ways, but they don't have that bridge between us and the community that we're building stuff for. I remember every day when we pushed out like an update, we would like go on Reddit and like look at what people were doing with it, you know, and like look at live streams and all that kind of stuff, and just being like, oh my god, they're building this with it. We didn't even think about this, you know, and that was really cool. It was really cool. And they were also using stuff in like very weird ways that was like, oh shit, like we didn't think about that. Is that gonna be okay? But yeah. But yeah, the projects definitely become way longer though. Oh no. Don't give me this ArtStation spam, please. But yeah. Yeah, it was really fun. And I do have to say, like, I don't think I've done voluntary overtime once, and that's because I really just wanted to do more work, you know? And it was an opportunity to learn from someone senior as well. And then I came in over the weekend on a Saturday or something because I had nothing else to do, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go in. Like, might as well make more use of my time, you know? So that's what I did. The rest of the time, sure, it was stressful to release stuff, right? But I never felt bad about it, I think. I never felt bad about it. It was genuinely like very fulfilling to be able to put stuff out there and then see the community's reaction. It was so good. Was it a big team? No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I think in total between two projects when I joined Frontier, and I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong, but I think it was like 70 people across two projects, right? Because they were doing Elite Dangerous at that point too. And we were doing Planet Coaster. And I think the environment art team was 6 people. Was it 6? 6, 8, something like that. It's like it wasn't big, and most of our time was just pumping out assets, you know, just doing a bunch of assets. And in my case, like doing a bunch of modular kits, you know, I was doing a lot of that stuff. Reversi is saying, I'm going the international student route and definitely worried because most studios here don't sponsor juniors, from what I know. Mentorships might be better. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to scare you, right? And you're gonna find opportunities if you're really good at what you do and you put like a lot of time and effort into it, right? So don't let it scare you, but I think it's just a harsh time in the industry. So yeah, finding sponsorships or finding like internships and all that kind of stuff is gonna be pretty difficult in general. Yeah. It depends on where you're from. Some countries also, they don't need to pay their juniors. So that's also like another thing to contend with. But yeah. You'll find a way. Here's the thing though, like to put like a positive spin on it, like the people that really want it, right? And if you're one of them, you're gonna find a way. That's what I did. You just have to be pretty savvy with it, you know? Look at the landscape, look at the data, look at what other people around you are doing, and try to see if you can find a gap in, let's say, timeline or in your skill set or whatever you can do, right? Whatever you can do to stand out. Focus on that. Foxy Kiss is asking, when applying for a paid position, but being open to an internship as well, is it a good idea to mention that to the company? When applying for a paid position, but being open to an internship as well, is that a good idea to mention that too? So the difference there is an internship is usually, you can only do an internship usually if it is attached to a school curriculum, right? That is the bridge basically between universities and then a professional setting, right? If if they offer you a paid position, that means that either they don't have the capacity to do the official internship route, or yeah, or that's just not an option. But is it a good idea to mention that to the company? I mean, so in the case in this case, oh, you're applying. If you're applying to a company for a paid position, I think I get what you're saying. The implication is that the internship is going to be unpaid, right? But that's not always the case. For example, when I did my internship, it was fully paid. I was getting a junior salary. So, like, an internship doesn't always mean that you're not going to get paid, right? Some countries actually like don't allow you to not get paid if you do an internship. But yeah, in your case, if you're coming from school, you might as well call it an internship / paid position. If you don't have any attachment to like a proper curriculum, just apply for paid positions and don't mention an internship. That's what I would do. What should a junior portfolio look like to be considered hireable? Let's have a look. I'll give you an example. So, this is an example that I brought up. I talked about this with her yesterday as well. But I'm gonna share it here in the chat. If you wanna see what like a hireable junior is, it would be a person like this. Let me share my screen as well, so I can give it a bit of an explanation. She joined us as a junior environment artist when we were at Playgrounds, right? I wasn't involved in the hiring whatsoever, so I had no influence on it. But yeah, something like this, you know, an environment, really impressive, really nice, really good quality bar, nice blending between all the textures. It is telling you something, right? It's a back alley. There's like a little bit of storytelling in here. 2 different lighting things. That's like nice to add on top of it. Not necessary. But then breakdown, you know? Nice, clean breakdown. Oh, how did you approach things? Oh, you added an ID map. Interesting. Okay. So what I'm getting here is I get insights into what you're doing and how you're doing it. Some clean breakdowns, modular meshes. How did you make them? RGB masking, UV sets. One for the masks, right? That's for the RGB masking. Then for the trim sheets. And then cool shader stuff on top of it. And then references. That's it. Pretty condensed, right? And then you have this environment. And then also you have this unique prop. Because the only question that I have here with this environment is like, okay, but how good are you at making like individual assets should we need you to, right? And then you answer that question by showcasing this, and it's like, okay, cool. No questions, you know? And again, breakdowns are really well done. The texturing is good. This is what you could see in like a game, right? Like straight up. So I think if you want an example, this is a good one. Yeah. I will actually, this is something that I want to do. I want to look at more junior portfolios that recently got hired and kind of compile like a list of them so that we can share them with all of you. That would be cool. Quentin is saying not paid as a junior, isn't that intern? Yeah, as I said before, like I was paid as an intern as well. It kind of just depends on the country and the company and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Mr. Slow, I hope that was helpful to give you like an idea. If you want more of this stuff, if you want more of this advice, I probably have like 20 to 30 hours of portfolio reviews already that you can check out on the YouTube channel if you want to have more advice when it comes to that. Generic Man is coming in with a technical question. How do you know when to use unique textures versus trim sheets versus RGB masking versus vertex paint materials? I also restart texturing because I mess up. As there's no set rule, right? But the way that I always look at it is hero props, always unique. That's an easy one. Then we go to, oh, here you're saying trim sheets versus RGB masking. They're used in together, right? Trim sheets is for things that are going to be reused in your environment, but can't use tileable textures. So for example, whenever you use a tileable texture on like large surfaces like walls and all that kind of stuff, right? That's great for tileable textures. But let's say you have like pretty ornate architecture. So let's say like Art Deco architecture or something like that with like lots of swirls and lots of curls. You can't just slap a tileable on it and then call it done. Yeah, that's not going to work. So, I mean, it's not a set rule, right? But unique textures for hero props, vertex painting with tileables for big architectural things, and anything in between, I would try to do that with a trim sheet or a texture atlas. If you want to have like a very broad rule. When will the last portfolio review be up? I wasn't there at the time. I keep forgetting to do this. I will change that up right now. Because I think it sets them automatically to unlisted or something like that. It's something in my settings that is not great. Let me see. Yeah. So let me put that to public. There we go. That's available now. Thank you for the reminder. And then unfortunately, Top G, we're gonna have to skip you this time. I know that you asked about this earlier, but with the time change, I know it's confusing. Yeah, I just wanted to say that as well. Quentin is saying in France, it's less than 2 months that cannot be paid. More than that, it's paid at 600 a month minimum if it didn't increase. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know what the specific regulations are, but again, it's so specific to like the country and the company and like all that kind of stuff, because you have technically Frontier Developments didn't have to pay me for my internship, but they did, right? Foxy Kids is saying, maybe I meant that there is no open position for my area, but I'd like to write to the company nevertheless. If they don't have an opening and you want to write them about it anyway, I mean, chances of that working are going to be pretty low. I think it's honestly better if you then try to go the more personal route and connect with someone that works at that company and ask them if they have any advice if you want to get to working for that company. That's probably what I would do. Because honestly, if you want to go through the website and they have no open positions and you're still going to apply for like an open position anyway, sometimes, I mean, I wouldn't advise that, but sometimes what they have is a general application or like an open application within your field, then apply. But otherwise, I wouldn't send them like a random self-application, if that makes sense, because I can almost guarantee you that they're just going to throw it in the bin anyway. So I would then go for the more personal route. And even if they are not in a position to get you hired, at least you get some tips on how you can be better prepared for next time. Okay, that makes sense. But what counts as a hero prop? This is the question about like when to use with texturing technique, right? What counts as hero prop? We're gonna go back to what I like talking about. Storytelling, right? The most important thing in your scene that is going to be the focal point should most likely be a hero prop. That's it. Quentin is saying, is company dependent for less than 2 and there is a minimum, but sometimes they pay the same as minimum wage? Yeah, honestly, this is interesting. We talked about this yesterday as well. The competition in this industry is fierce. There's so many people on the job market at this point. And even if we disregard like the current situation, right? If I take you back to when I joined the industry, Most of the people that got in, they made it work regardless of all the rest. And what I mean by that is I can remember getting my contract and having to sign it in front of HR, right? And I asked them if I could take it home. I was never not gonna sign that contract, you know? No matter what number was gonna be on there. Like, if I'm being really honest. This was like the thing that I was working for like 4 years, and this was like my open door, right? Is that the way that it's supposed to work? No. Ideally, what I want to see is that every company is like, hey, look, we have a high standard when it comes to our pay and the amount that we wanna see you grow, and we really invest in our people and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like that's oftentimes just disconnected from what reality is, right? Especially for a junior. As unfortunate as that is, you just have to make things work at that stage. That's also coming from a person who was lucky to get paid, right, during his internship. I have no idea how I would have made it work if they didn't pay me. I probably would have taken a loan or something like that. Which I don't even knew if I could, or like I had to ask my parents or something like that, you know? But that would have been weird. I mean, yeah. But yeah, sometimes if you want to get in, I think you just have to do what you got to do, right? Sometimes that means making sacrifices, even though like I want it to be better. Just the market, especially right now, is just it is probably not going to be in your favor if we're being really open and honest about it, because there's just no reason to, right? So yeah. But over the long period of time in your career, junior is like the arena that you're fighting in, and then you graduate from the arena, and then you open yourself up to be, I don't know, more confident, and you build up your skill set, and you have more options. If you still need to be savvy. I think you still need to be savvy in this industry. That's never going to go away. So I don't think it's ever going to be an industry where you can kind of just relax and kind of that's at least not the way that I see it. It's an industry that's always going to be very hit and miss, like very hits based, especially when it comes to AAA. So that means that there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to be at the will of their company, right? So yeah, I hope that was helpful. I mean, that's the way that I think about things, and that is also something that I really try to instill in people, right? That it's not only about like the job in the industry. That's when it begins, right? And then it's looking at like, okay, how can I take the next step, or how can I build something onto the side that I have control over, that I can then use to like be stable on my own. I think that is the way to go, in my opinion. Marius is asking, any recommendations for what needs to be included or excluded in the cover letter or resume? Yes, go look at some portfolio reviews. Honestly, we talk a lot about resumes. When it comes to cover letters, I'm gonna be open. I fucking hate cover letters. I've honestly not even a clue what needs to be in a cover letter. I know that, for example, when people submitted cover letters, I can't remember if they needed to or not, but I can't remember ever reading a cover letter when I was involved in recruitment. Like I cannot remember reading anyone's cover letter. So yeah, it is honestly just a formality. What I would say with a cover letter is Quentin is saying, hello, I want to be in your team, here's my portfolio. Because, okay, so let's zoom out, right? If we think about this tactically, look at all the things that you already have out there, right? You have your CV, which is, or like your resume, which is supposed to be the thing that showcases your professional achievements, your skills, and your career, right? So that's the very, very, very clean version of what your career has been up until this point. You have your portfolio, which shows off what you can do. right? So it's a visual showcase of like, oh, this is all the stuff that I can do, technical skills and artistic skills, right? So what is left? It's you, right? So that to me kind of brings me to the point where like a cover letter is probably going to be more about like your motivations and what brings you to the industry and how you can fit into this specific team for this specific project. That's probably what I would focus my cover letter on, because otherwise, if they just want to know your resume, it's easier to go and look at your, well, if they want to know about your career, it's easier to look at your resume, right? So that's probably the way that I would focus it now. If I had to go back to the way that I constructed my cover letter, was I had 3 paragraphs. One was the introduction of who I am and why I'm an artist. Second paragraph is why I want to work for your studio and how I can be applied. And then I honestly can't remember the third paragraph. I cannot remember the third paragraph. I don't know what I did with that one. And I think it was more just like my previous career achievements or something like that. I would probably skip that at this point. Generic Man is asking, environment art can vary a lot. Is it okay to focus on one theme, genre, or of environment art, like urban versus fantasy versus nature, etc.? Are assets like vegetation expected from everyone? No. Vegetation is a very specific role because it's very different from normal prop creation. So vegetation is not expected from everyone. It can be a good career with a lot of stability because there's not a lot of people that focus on making really, really good vegetation. But it kind of ends up in the same competitive sphere. Well, no, I was gonna say it ends up in the same competitive sphere compared to like material art, right? What I mean by that is there's not a lot of focus on it, but the quality bar is even higher than the normal environment creation, right? Because there's also not a lot of people that do a foliage role, let's say. I've worked with like big companies where they had like a lot of environment artists and then they had like a couple, like a handful of foliage artists in comparison. Same thing with a material artist, right? If you have 2 good material artists, they can crank out like the materials for the whole world if they wanted to. But yeah, to come back to your question, I want to flip it around a bit. Your portfolio should be a showcase of what you like. What do you like, right? Because honestly, the thematics and all of that can be changed, right? Let's say just because you do like really high fantasy art doesn't mean that your skill set is not necessarily going to be applicable to Halo. Sounds weird, but there's some artistic fundamentals. Like let's say you're really good on how to use shapes and how to use contrast and how to use your composition and colors and all that kind of stuff. That is the fundamental layer, right? If you're really good at that stuff, the additional thing, like let's say the thematic that you really like to work on, that is like the second layer, but that is easy to switch out for something else. Right. We are going to get started on some feedback because I've been waffling for a long time. We don't have too many people for today, so waffling was allowed for the session, but I think it's time that we dive into things. So for the people that are here, I think we have 8 people. Feel free to raise your hand and then we'll start out with the first person who raises their hand. Go. Let's do it. Beauty is first. Then Quinton. And then Tianamatsu, I don't think you're in here. Are you? Well, we'll get to you. I'm trying to match up the names that I can recognize from Discord with the names that I see on here. We'll get you. We'll get to you in just a sec. Foxy's asking, do you think it's worth including an artist in my portfolio even if I didn't get a job? Nope. I don't think so. I think I'm on. I don't know. Yeah, Maddie, you're on. But yeah, no, I wouldn't include an artist in your portfolio. Because artists are always a time pressure thing, which usually means that it's not going to be high quality enough compared to your other work. Because let's say most artists are a week, sometimes they're 2 weeks. I feel like I don't really hear about like 2 week artists all that much anymore. But if you have to make like something in a week, the chances of it being like really stunning to put on your portfolio, I wouldn't do that. Another thing there is we can recognize what is an artist. Because these things do the rounds, right? So internally in professional circles, we talk to each other, we talk from company to company, and then we will hear about like what company is doing which artist. Maybe not all of them, right? But I have a general sense of like the artists that are out there right now, for example. And if I can recognize that on your portfolio, I am not even going to look at it because I know that it's an artist and it has less value than your personal work, right? So I wouldn't do it. My name is Tien on Discord. Did you... Okay, well, we'll get to you in a sec. I'm curious because you're not in the list, I think. Not that I can recognize, at least. We'll dive into that in just a bit. Cool, but we're going to start with Pewdie. So let me switch on over to the screen. This is not Pewdie's work. This is Pewdie's work. There we go. Yes, Pewdie, you had a story. I need to read that story because that story was long. So, and we will definitely be talking about the length of the story. Let me switch it up here. So, cool. Oh, I see, Tien. Unfortunately, you submitted too late. So we will have to have a look at it. It's a bit confusing with like all the time zones and all that kind of stuff, but you have to submit before, like an hour before I start streaming because I do prep for these sessions. So, yeah. Cool. Okay, so got a couple of people who were late. Lenny, same thing counts for you too, buddy. Sorry. Yeah, I really need to sort out like the deadline. We need to put like a deadline counter on that. I just haven't had the time to sort that out. So apologies for that, people. But let's see. So, Pewdie. All right, there's a lot of story here. Let me quickly read through it, right? So a detective is investigating a string of mysterious explosions. Each incident occurs in a different location, different victims, but always involves the same kind of a device. A small, intricately constructed bomb powered by a mechanical timer. Official reports call them incidents. All the evidence eventually points to a city where the supplier of the clock components is located. Okay, so I like what you're doing here, right? Story is great. Condense it to 1 to 2 sentences or something like that. Because all the stuff that you're doing here is great to maybe call out specific things in your scene, right? But what you want to focus on with your immediate story is what are the main things that you want to call out, right? Because, for example, each incident occurs in different locations with different victims. How are you going to showcase like different victims? Because isn't that what always happens on a crime, right? Because I mean, you're not gonna hit the same person twice with a bomb, I'm assuming. Right, but that's what I mean. Like you go in such detail, but it's thinking about what elements of the story can you actually visually display, right? And if it's a lot of those smaller things, let's say different locations, that is literally going to be a red string going from like one post-it to another. So that's really simple, right? So what I would focus on is, okay, the detective, right? So it continues, right? So fortunately for our detective, it has a friend in the city, a skilled clockmaker he's known for years. With his friend's permission, the detective sets up a temporary office in the basement of the friend's house, which is also a little workshop. Okay, so there's a lot of layers there, right? He's living with a friend, set up a temporary office in the basement, and it's also a little workshop. A little workshop for what? Right? Because I have the feeling that even with this layer, it might get confusing already if, let's say, you add like a bunch of like watchmaker stuff, right? yeah, like a clockmaker stuff. And then he's gonna set up shop in the basement, right? Because I'm looking at this as like a finished thing, right? Let's imagine the finished portfolio piece. There's just a bunch of random clocks, and there's a crime scene investigator like in between those clocks. How do we then visually, right, without telling the story, how do we visually make the link between, oh, this is not him, this is his friend who lives upstairs, and this is the basement of this buddy, right? Because it gets so specific and so niche that it's really difficult to visualize those things, right? Unless if we're going to be working with like multiple scenes and multiple frames, right? But that's not what we're going to be doing, right? So what I would do in this case is probably strip the clockmaker layer back a lot and just focus on the detective that's in like a basement, right? And focus on what they're investigating rather than, oh, all this stuff that happens around him, but it's actually not important to the story of the investigator, right? Cool. So there are old tables and chairs, enough to build a workshop without much effort. The mattress that is been provided for sleeping turns out to be large, so every morning the detective puts it out and then up against the wall to free up some space. The lady detective feels like he's close to solving the case and therefore has begun to constantly postpone sleep in favor of work. To stay awake and feel alert, he drinks anti-sleeping pills and a lot of coffee. I think this is great, right? It adds a lot of flavor. And, you know, having the mattress there, having like a bunch of coffee cups that are spilled over, like a bunch of sleeping tablets and all that kind of stuff, that is great because it relates to the person who is actually at the center of the investigation, right? So that stuff is cool. That adds a lot of flavor to it. And that can result in like really cool set dressing for the scene. I like that. First, the detective examines what he brought, case files, photographs, and fragments of the device. With the clockmaker's guidance, he begins to disassemble and analyze the mechanism of different clocks. Above the desk, he begins to map out incidents, connecting locations, etc. Cool, okay. Yeah, so it's gonna be very difficult to link it back to his friend who's already a clockmaker, right? That is a layer that is gonna be pretty tricky. And also, if you think about it, making a workshop for clocks is going to be a lot of time that you're going to be investing into something that is like tangential to the story, right? So that's also the way that I'm thinking about this, that we have to make like a lot of clock components and all that kind of stuff, right? That's like a bunch of time that we're going to be investing into a thing that is not crucial to the story, because the story here that is crucial is the detective who is trying to solve a killing spree, right? Cool. So my idea is to make the working space as tight as possible and uncomfortable to work. The reason is that it's not a place to live, but to solve cases. Yes. Yeah, I like it. I was also thinking about the Heisenberg thing. When Hank didn't know that Walt is Heisenberg. Yeah. So I get the story where it's coming from, right? But my question is, how do you visualize that in one image? Because that is super tricky to do, right? If we had like, let's say 2 images, or we're looking down from like the workshop into like the basement and we can see him working there or something like that, right? Then we can build a better connection. But trying to cram in so much stuff into like a single frame is going to be really, really difficult. Right? It's almost okay. If we think about like Breaking Bad, right? Heisenberg is in his lab. That is just his lab, right? There's no real hint about the connection with like Hank and all that kind of stuff there, right? It's a bit on the nose, but yeah. So yeah, I would simplify the whole story, and it's going to save you like a lot of time when doing so, right? But I would really focus on the main story first, and yeah, keep it at that. Then you ask a question about like how the space feels, right? So we talked about the story, right? So let me make down some notes here, because condense it to 1 or 2 sentences. focus on the detective. Right? Like he is the literal focus of the scene. That's what I would focus on, right? Because the more complex we make the story, the harder it will be for other people to realize like what the hell is happening, right? So focus is the key word. So detective, crimes, and the detective's state of mind. I think that's a good one. Like the bed on the floor and the sleeping pills and the coffee, and like you can do some really, really cool stuff with that. I like it a lot. But that's all the stuff that I would focus on, right? Because anything else is going to be very, very tricky to kind of convey. And then, honestly, what I would do with the rest of the scene, I would just fill in like a bunch of generic props, right? Because I do like the idea that he's living in like a basement that is not designed for this kind of work, right? But I think that at this point, it can literally just be like generic stuff. Like literal like boxes and baskets and all that kind of stuff, right? To kind of fill up the space. And I think the contrast between that is like, okay, he's a cop, but what is he doing in like a random basement, And then people can kind of figure out or like kind of make up like a story in their mind. And I think that would be good. So that's what I would focus on. When it comes to the space itself, I think you've actually done a great job with breaking up the space, right? This is the old version where it just literally feels like a box, like literally a boolean that you've cut into like a box, right? And you can see that it feels uninteresting. It doesn't have like sort of like a dynamic nature to it, right? And then you added this, and it kind of adds like this little nook and this little element, and it makes the whole thing feel more cramped and all that kind of stuff too. So yeah, I mean, you've also moved like the walls in more, but I think that's great. I like this one way better than the previous one. I think you've done an amazing job with that. That doesn't even resemble a heart, but hey, we'll deal with it. So yeah. Let's see. This open area where the mattress is supposed to be, where he sleeps. Oh, what I would do with the mattress is I would literally have the mattress like, I don't know, like angled here in the corner or something like that, Like you have like his pillow and then you literally have like his freaking sleeping pills here. Right? And you have like a couple of sleeping pills like next to it with like a little cup with water or something like that. Or it's probably just going to be coffee, right? Because you don't really want to put it like in the front of the camera because that's going to look weird, right? Because then we are just going from like, we're basically going from, this angle to this angle to this angle to this angle. And I think what is quite nice is we can break it up as much as you can. So that's why I kind of put it in the corner here so that it doesn't become like another straight line in the whole sequence, right? Cool. And yeah, you asked the question about like the size and the whole space, but I think it works like way better now. So awesome job. I think you've done fantastic. So yeah, put the sleeping pills and all that kind of stuff on the floor. Right, so give it all. So with sleeping pills, a couple of pills next to it, a cup, and you just have like, I don't know, like his bed next to it, kind of tucked away in a corner, That's cool. I like it. And then with a bunch of generic stuff like these case files, right? They're going to be so good to use because what you can do is you can put a label on them, but you can make the label modular. As in, you just have like, I don't know, what would be on it? Like 1998 to 1999, right? Like that's one of the labels, and then you just switch up the letters and make it like 1999 to 2000, and then you have like another box, you know, and you just like slightly change up like the textures or something like that. But that's what I would do. So what I mean with like modular labels is imagine that you have your texture, right? And you have like 0, 1, 2, 3. You can literally just say, you can literally just cut out like a little bit of the texture and just be like, okay, I need like, I don't know, you can combine them into like whatever you want, right? So if you put them together, then you can kind of make, and these are just like individual little decals floating on top of like a white label, right? So you have like your white label below it, and then you have like your numbers as individual pieces of geometry with transparency on top of it, just for like all the numbers if you wanted to. And that gives you a lot of flexibility. You can make 1,000 boxes without like ever really needing to make like a new texture. You can just combine it together from this. Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Beauty. Appreciate it. It's looking good. Making some good progress. That's cool. Yeah. Think smart, you know? Like, well, work smart, not hard. That's my motto. Blanco is asking, speaking of clocks, how would you approach the texturing of cogs and gears? Would you slap a metallic texture on it, or would you create an atlas texture? You can actually create a reusable modular kit of stuff, right? But like muscle fit, muscled fit is saying, I love the name. It depends on how close you're gonna get with the camera, right? So if you get really close, you probably want to do like a bake or something like that, but that doesn't mean that every little gear is gonna be unique, right? You can have a kit where you just say like, okay, I have a big gear and I have a medium gear and I have a small gear, and then maybe I have like, I don't know, like another flat gear or something like that, right? And that then allows you to make like any sort of, I don't know, contraption that you want, right? Because you can just reuse like all these gears and scale them up and down a little bit, and you can make like really complex things by just using like a very small set of things that you've made. But yeah, it depends on the size and the size of things and how close you can get with the camera to then figure out like what kind of workflow is the best. Because for example, with your technique, right, just slap a metallic texture on it, that can work if it's pretty small. You know, if you don't even have like enough resolution to make like a really nice texture, yeah, just slapping a metal texture on it is probably gonna work. But with anything bigger, you probably want to take care that it looks quite nice. Cool. Next person for today is Quinten. Quinten is over here. I think, Quinten, you only had like a quick question for like some technical trim sheet stuff, right? Let me go to your thingy here. I'm creating some ornaments for my concept. I want to use trim sheets for them, and I'm struggling with how to make them. Yeah. Okay. I kind of broke it down here, right? Because you kind of struggled in this way to kind of break it up into a trim sheet, right? Because you have two of these sections coming together to make a trim sheet, and you want to make that out of a trim sheet technically, right? I think honestly, this is a place where you have to make like a sacrifice and just try to make it as close as you can with your trim sheet already, and then just be smart with how you use like the layering, right? So this is what I would do. I would literally have like two trims that are coming together, and then have the bottom be like a separate trim as well. The one on the left too. I'm not sure. Oh, Muscled Fit, are you trying to share a link? The Z part. Yeah, yeah, I don't links don't work on YouTube. Sorry, buddy. But that's awesome though. You just realized, Quentin? Yeah. I mean, it is pretty straightforward, right? Like you can literally just do like a cut here, and then you have your trim sheet applied, right? So this one is kind of straightforward. So you basically just go from like trim, make an angle, trim, and then make an angle, trim. With anything like this, if it is consistent and it doesn't scale down or doesn't like interlink with each other, I'll give you a tip. So another tip is whenever you're doing trim sheets, tip for trims. I don't know. Are you using Blender? I think so, right? So what you would do is always pick like the edge along the length. So that means if you're taking this guy, you pick this like edge and you select that whole thing, you make that a seam, and then you quadrify all your islands. Not quadrify. Oh, what is the option called again? Dang it. I need to look into this now. Oh, it's gonna open here, I guess. Okay. Okay, Blender, thank you. And you want to quadrify your islands. Super simple, because that's literally just like a one-click thing, and then you can just, yeah, quadrify all that stuff. While we're talking about tips, use loop tools or edit edge flow. I personally prefer edit edge flow. It's a Maya thing, but you have it as an add-on for Blender because of course you have. I use this, and you can basically select, you can add an edge here, edit edge flow, and it will like match the curve. Rectify. That's probably the one. Yeah. Let's see. Let's have a quick look here. So what do I use? ZenUV. Oh my god, it's been a while. Quadrify Islands. That's probably the one. Yep. So that makes it like really simple. So for... Oh yeah. The first add-on that you activated? Okay, cool. In that case, just add like a couple of edges here and make it like nice and smooth, right? That's the benefit of working with a trim sheet. You can afford like a little bit more geometry. So that's cool. Now, for this section here, I would break it up like this, you know? Basically have the same sort of curve going into it, mirror that curve, and then clean up like the edges where it goes into the end, right? Well, it's basically going into the shape here. So yeah, basically just have a curve here that goes into it, same thing here, and then you have this little spot that opens up. I would just add like a tileable or something like that there. Or slap the same trim on it and have it like inset into the facade a little bit. That's going to be good. But you got like this beautiful texture that you can use. I would just use that. Yeah, that's it. I hope that was helpful. Thank you, Quentin. But yeah, sometimes with trim sheets, you have to sacrifice a bit of the design to go for the functionality and the optimization of a trim sheet, right? In this case, it's honestly not worth it to make like a unique thing just for this one thing that you can kind of make out of trim sheets. If you have like really bespoke and unique ornaments, I would then make them separately. Tileable is just a pattern in some Painter. Yeah, that's all good. Placeholder stuff, that works. Cool, next person. Thank you, Quentin. Maddie. And we are looking at your work already. Okay, couple of things here, Maddie. So one question that you had was about the textures, right? Like how do you keep pushing them forward? It comes down to really being picky with your references, right? I looked around at like this reference. I liked it a lot for a couple of reasons, and I'll explain why. The first thing is because you can clearly see like where the damage happens, right? So that's like what I liked about this as well. It has like very clear signs of damage and like the paint kind of cracking and stuff, which is pretty cool. Also, what I noticed is a gradient. So you have like this gradient of being like more worn at the bottom, right, in this area. Because you can kind of see it. It's probably been bumped into like a bunch of stuff. People kicked it, all that kind of stuff. And you can see that affect the prop, right? And in general, actually, this counts for every prop. It's always nice to have a little bit of a gradient because that helps you blend with whatever you're going to put it on, right? So this can be applied to almost anything that you have. And it can be pretty subtle or pretty intense. I think this is an intenser example compared to some other stuff. Then another example here is really paying attention where the dirt is gonna go, right? So probably for most of your drawers, you're probably gonna see like the lacquer still being like pretty much intact, right? Or being like undamaged. But then around like interaction points, like handles and keyholes and all that kind of stuff, that's where you're going to see like more wear and tear, right? So I always try to think about it in that way. Like if I'm literally touching whatever I'm trying to build, where would I be touching it? Because those interaction points, they're always going to be like more worn than anything else. And you can see that here, right? Like this cabinet, I found that on like a random like website that does auctions. You can see that it's easy to clean like the top surfaces, but it's really hard to clean like the interior surfaces. And the same thing also goes for like if you want to protect the wood and you add like a lacquer or like a protective paint or something like that on top of it, it's going to be harder to apply that in crevices, right? Because it dries different, it probably isn't like applied uniformly and all that kind of stuff. So that also means that the wood in those areas is going to soak that paint up in a different way, and that's where discoloration comes from, right? So you can kind of use like a very logic driven approach to give you more inspiration for where you need to change your textures. Right. Second reason why I like this guy here, roughness variation. Look at that. Look at this drawer compared to the frame around the drawer, and then like this door. I like it. You know, just a variation in roughness. You can clearly see that, you know, the doors have probably been replaced, like the drawers have probably been refurbished at a certain point, and you can see the literal difference in wood, right? Which is really cool. This then also brought me to your set of drawers where we are not even seeing any roughness, right? That doesn't mean that there is none. I think you probably added like a roughness texture and it probably looks decent, but you have to put your lights in the position where they can shine a light literally on those roughness surfaces, right? So those textures feel very flat, and I would fix the lighting first and then push more contrast in it when it comes to your roughness. We'll talk about lighting in just a second. There was another thing that I wanted to bring up here. You have normal issues. These darker areas and the way that you can kind of see the normal, it's not aligned with the edge. It kind of curves and it kind of follows like the triangulation of the mesh, right? This is indicating that something has gone wrong in the baking process. Whether you wrongly assigned like your normals on your mesh, or I don't know, you've done the bake wrong or something like that, that is a hint at what is happening here or what has gone wrong. Same thing here as well. I think that, or that might just be like a weird lighting angle, but I assume that is going to be like normal information as well. That's gone a little bit bonkers. You might even end up with like a little bit of bleeding in your normals in your bake as well, because this information doesn't seem like it fits there. But yeah, I would definitely solve those like normal issues because they are an immediate telltale sign that somewhere in your process, you've done something wrong, and well, the assumption is that you don't know how to fix it, which is a fundamental skill when it comes to making assets, right? So that would be something to fix there. Cool. Second topic here is lighting. I think you have like a really good setup for lighting. I think you're just underutilizing it. What I mean by that is you have two candles and they're centered around the focal point, which is good, right? But then you completely kill any sort of contrast and intrigue that you can have with the scene by having this fake light that is just like killing any sort of like contrast in the scene, right? That's where this kind of light comes from, like this neutral light that is just like, I don't know, floating around in midair. Use that cautiously. If you want to light up a bit of your scene, I can get where that is coming from. But I would turn that down to like 25% of the current strength or something like that. And really make it like an interesting scene that is more focused on the candles that you've lit up. What you could also do is if you want to have a better balance between your lights here, let's say you have like a point light here, point light here. You know that you can't get like a certain intensity from candles, right? So you have to kind of balance them out again. What you can do, however, is then have in the middle of those two candles, you can then put like a little bit of a fill light to kind of mimic the light kind of bouncing around, right? I would disable shadows on those and then turn the intensity to lower down again. And that light is purely there to give you like a little bit more of a fill light around the area that you're going to be looking at, right? So yeah, that would be my suggestions there, because I do like the setup that you have, right? It's more just I want to make use of these candles, right? Like make it a really, really cool and intricate kind of scene. Because here's the thing, right? Like maybe you added this light because you wanted to show this in breakdowns, right? But this is honestly the reason why breakdowns exist. Do not, and this is a good general tip for everyone, don't ever sacrifice the picture for the asset. Because you can show off the asset in your breakdowns, but you'd never want to sacrifice on the image itself or the story or the environment in this case. You tried moving some UVs around from last time. Forgot to clean that part up. Okay, got it. Yeah, that's something to be aware of. But yeah, otherwise looking good. I think honestly most of the textures I would do the lighting first, and I would see how you can accentuate your materials first, and then start tweaking them. That's the sequence of things. Yeah, good stuff though, Maddie. Good stuff. It is an intricate set of assets, right? So it's gonna take a little bit of time to make it look good, but yeah, best of luck. Thoughts on the edges? You have to be more specific than just edges. I don't know what you mean by that. Or just like the general edges overall? Yeah, they're still pretty sharp. Like, honestly, okay. This is the reason why you want to have bigger edges, right? Is to do stuff like this, where it captures like a nice highlight. And that's what you want to do, right? But now at a certain distance, like we can't even see it. So exaggerate those edges a bit more, and that's going to be pretty helpful. Because like there's some cool stuff happening here, right? But I want to see a little bit more of it. So yeah, I think your gut is right, Maddie. Just a little bit too sharp. Scale them up a little bit. That's going to be good. Okay. Cool. Thank you, Maddie. Who was next then? Maddie, Lenny. I think we had everyone then. Okay. So it means that it's time to blast through some stuff. Thank you, Maddie. I appreciate it. Appreciate you posting. Keep up the good work, buddy. Next up is Hatsino. Let's have a look. I think the first question was how to do hard surface sculpt, like these edges, right? Let me get the context here. Yeah, what's the best way to do the angle? Wait, are you talking about angel or angle sculpts? Because I assumed angle as in like all these angular sculpts. I'll explain both. So if we're doing like the main bulk of the asset, the way that I would do it is, yeah, I would make this hard surface like the way that you do it now. And then to start out with these, oh, I see it now. Am I just... No, it is angel. God, so confusing. Yeah, I think Smoogle actually brought it up perfectly. Like start with a base mesh. Start with a base mesh and then go from there. That's what I would do probably. You could probably combine it with like simulating some clothes on top of it to kind of give you like a little bit of folds already. But yeah. Making the clothes is kind of hard part, and then the hair. I'll definitely look for tutorial on ZBrush though. Yeah, this is not easy because the reason why you want to start with the base mesh is because it's also anatomy, right? If you want to start this from scratch, you're basically sculpting an entire human, which is kind of crazy to do for a project. But yeah, for this, I would start with the base mesh, kind of pose it into the right pose, and then start sculpting on top of it. I would probably give... Yeah, what I would do, I would get a base mesh, I would take it into Blender, I would then model like a fabric on top of it, just like the shape of it. Maybe try simming it, but I think there's going to be so much intersection that's probably not going to be worth it. But I would literally just model this on top of it. Right, so get a base mesh, model all this stuff on top of it, and then start sculpting all the folds and all that kind of stuff. That's what I would do. Yeah. Second question for optimization. How would I be able to optimize it? Is it best to do manual topology using Quadra? Yeah, that's probably going to be a good way. I use live surfaces, or I don't know what that would translate to. But like basically you can turn your high poly into a live surface, and then whatever low poly stuff you model on top of it is going to attach to the closest surface position of your high poly, which is pretty cool. I love doing that whenever I need to do retopology. But yeah, quad draw is probably going to be like pretty similar. I think you can also like make it snap to the surface and stuff. But yeah, that's probably what I would do. Yes. Cool. Good stuff. Thanks, Zeno. And then next person, I think we're just going to go in sequence now. So Ilya is coming in. Do the textures look more readable? I think they do. So I think you've made a good progress on making the texture look more readable. The main thing that I'm still wondering though is what material is it really, right? Because it just feels, at the moment, it literally just feels like there is just like a generic like tileable slapped on top of it to kind of give it like, I don't know, it's kind of this color. But if we can get closer to the actual appeal of what the material is, like, is it that fake kind of like, not plastic, but like, yeah, let's say plastic material, or is it wood, or, you know, like, that's probably what you want to get closer to. Because there's a difference between, let's say, this old kind of cabinetry and then this newer kind of like, this is not wood anymore, right? Like it's literal, I mean, this might still be wood, but like a lot of this is just like synthetic materials. And they have like a different reflection, different roughness, different response to their material, right? And trying to make that look, make it look nicer, is probably going to be the best way. I think you can kind of see like the intensity of the normal map here. You might need to tone that down and kind of keep that sort of intensity for the edges, right? So that only around the edges you kind of have this like little broken up pieces, and then the core of the door is actually not going to be that damaged, right? Be like a nice bit of variation. Thinking about like how you would break up the noise a little bit. Yeah, I mean the lighting in this scene with a dim light, it's always going to be trickier to be able to read your materials like really well, right? I don't know actually. I mean, this is going to be like way too small. Unless you have stuff like this, right? Like in this case, you have your light literally coming in and hitting this like a really nice roughness spot on like this little chair here, right? If you have that in your scene, that allows you to highlight certain materials, because materials, as you've seen in the previous example with Maddie, is you can potentially make really beautiful materials, but then if you're not hitting it with the correct light, then you're not presenting the materials in their full light, right? So that's also something to think of. It's the combination of the two that helps a lot. I've added some cabinet examples as well. I think what is always an easy thing to do, especially with these sort of cabinets, is adding in some elements to give an indication of how they're manufactured. You can see this little slip that goes all around it, right? Stuff like that can really indicate like how things are made, and it can add a structural believability to anything that you do. So that can also help. Same thing with these guys, right? Like maybe these old kitchen cabinets, they had like a bracket on underneath it that was kind of still like supporting them. It is stuff like that that can make something that kind of feels pretty basic into something that actually feels like it's crafted and it's built in real life, right? This is just an example, right? It doesn't have to be those brackets, but it just needs to be something like having a look at cabinetry and really looking at like, oh, how are they attached to the wall and how can I make it feel maybe a bit more ramshackle, right? Because some of these older flats, you probably have like a bunch of people that are just like, hey, look, we don't have the right plug, so I'm just going to put a bracket in place and just attach it onto the bracket. And I can add to the feeling of, hey, we don't have a lot of money, so we're trying to be scrappy and we need to be scrappy. So you can see that those small elements can actually be ingrained into the storytelling of the scene, right? Just as an example. Next is, you were talking about your references. I have some questions for you when it comes to those references. Let me have a look. What was your full question? Does the lighting fit the references? It will be adjusted later for sure. Just want to keep it on the right track. That is interesting, right? So, I mean, if you're going to adjust it, then my first question is like, okay, but the whole point of references is that you get as close to them as possible and then maybe tweak it down the line, right? But don't change it. So yeah, I don't know if that's just a wording thing, but yeah, try to stick with those references. I also had the feeling that like maybe this is weird, right? Like I don't know if you added the references later on and then just try to match them to what you already had, because they kind of do. Like it kind of does match, but I think we need, what do we need here? Like we need some sort of like volumetric, not volumetric, but like we need some sort of light coming into the scene, because right now it feels like the light comes in and actually the most interesting part of the light is kind of like hidden outside of like the scene, right? This is where the light will hit the floor. But that's not seen in the scene. Just kind of, I mean, you have like a little bit of light coming in here. But yeah. There's like some potential here that we can add, right? Because even if you look at something like this, it's always pretty cool to see like the light just casting in like some light and then it bouncing around into the scene, right? because we need like a little bit more light into the scene to kind of light this up. Because you have like pretty intense exterior light, but it feels like it's not really coming into the scene, and the scene itself is still pretty dark. Now, when it comes to your references, I wanted to bring something up here, and this is like a general tip for everyone. Whenever you look for references for anything that you want to build, do not use game references. I recommend you to only look at realistic things. The reason for that is whenever you look at a game, that is already someone else's interpretation of the real thing, right? And what you always want to do as an artist is you want to get close to the source as possible, right? So in this case, real photography, I don't know, maybe some movie sets or something like that if you want to go that way. But like real photography, get inspired by like photography books and all that kind of stuff, or just going out, you know, like maybe there's like abandoned places next to you that kind of have like this sort of vibe and get inspired by those. Another thing that I wanted to point out here, specifically to your case then, is that there are too many differences in the references that you're going for, right? For example, the green ones, they have a contrasting color, which is different from the stuff that you want to do, right? Because even though you have like a contrasting color through the wallpaper, they're doing it through light here. But I don't think that's what you're gonna go for, right? So if you want to keep it monochromatic, I think that's fine. But then you also need to look at, okay, how intense or how saturated do I want to go? For example, these blues down here, they feel like more saturated than like something like this, where it's like, this is more neutral compared to this sort of saturation, right? So try to be like really specific, because even with all of this, if let's say you were to give me this, and this is like, oh, this is like the lighting and the colors, this is what I want, then my first question would be like, okay, do we go for one light or do we go for like orange and blue? Because that's confusing. And then also how saturated do we want to go? Beauty is asking an odd question, but how do you search for lighting and color palette refs, especially color palette? So there are, God, I've not used them in a long time, but a couple of tricks that I can give is there is a movie reference database. What's that one called again? I'm pretty sure that someone is gonna come in here with the suggestion. Movie reference database. ShotDeck. ShotDeck. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Thank you all. I was so slow. I should have looked at the chat. ShotDeck is a good resource. I'll share it here. Even though I don't use it myself, right? Like my inspiration usually comes from like my own photography. I have like 20,000 pictures or something like that that I take whenever I go on vacation. I swear to God, if I go on vacation for like a week, I take like 5,000 images. So I have a lot of stuff that I can look through. But I'll give you another tip. You can actually, let's say you have an image like this. There are ways that you can drag that image into, let's say, Affinity, and you can let it generate a color palette for you. And you can decide like, oh, I want 16 colors, I want 4 colors, I want 2 colors, whatever you want. You can actually do that. It will generate like a color palette for you that you can then use, let's say, inside of Unreal, if you wanted to do that. So that could also be an option. Right. So last thing that I wanted to bring up here, Ilya, is last week you mentioned that you wanted to go for like a pretty natural lighting, and then this time around you want to go for like something pretty dramatic because you want to make it feel dramatic. I just wanted to highlight those are like two opposing things, right? Dramatic usually means more contrast, more intensity, more saturation, right? Where natural implies the opposite. Because a little quick illustration here, this is more natural, this is dramatic, right? So try to figure out which one you want to go for, just to make sure that you're aligned with your vision, right? Yeah. like a bunch of tips, a lot of information. But yeah, I think the improvements that you've made are actually pretty good, you know, making some really good improvements. I think the biggest thing to try and play around with now would probably be the lighting, to see if you can get like more the interior like a little bit more lit, you know? Something, and this is why game references can be nice, to kind of see how they did it from like a technical perspective. But you don't want to use them for actual like lighting inspiration. Yeah. Cool. I'll leave that up to you. Thank you, Ilya, for posting your work. Right, we have Alessandro here with a pretty ambitious battleship. Yeah. Is this the Yamamoto? Is that it? Yamamoto? Yeah. Okay, cool. But you just wanted to have feedback on proportions, topology, and reference accuracy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here already, right? So I am probably not going to be able to break this down in the time that I have allotted for it. So I am just going to go by eye a little bit on this one, because there is a lot of stuff happening. I will bring up what I really want to see. I had a look at your portfolio, right, to kind of gauge where you wanted to go with this. I will bring up something that I want to see from this project for you specifically, though. So yeah, small intersection here. But let's see. Because I think the scale that I get, the proportions of all the individual elements, if we look at like the whole ship, they feel really, really good, right? They feel pretty good. These old images look so badass. Let me bring it up on a big screen as well. And this is the tricky thing in your case, right? Like, you need to get good references, but most of the references that you're going to have are they're just not going to be the real thing, right? So you have to kind of rely on model kits and all that kind of stuff to hopefully do a faithful representation. What is interesting though, I don't know. On the real thing, I can't really see like these like side guns, right? They don't really seem to be added there yet. Because if we look at it from the top, you kind of have like these side guns. But on the actual thing, I can't really see them. And they look kind of weird, to be fair. But yeah, that's probably going to be, I don't know, depending on when the pictures got taken and all that kind of stuff. So I have a couple of questions. So total poly count. I want to know. I am curious. That's probably going to be my main question here. Because if you have a total poly count in mind, then we can actually start looking at stuff, right? Because even looking at some of the areas here, there's a lot of density happening. And then also in other ways, some of the stuff is like really low poly. Right? So I don't know, that's still work in progress. But like some of it, the contrast between like really low poly and then really high density is where you have to be really careful of things, right? Yeah, so that's what I would pay attention to when it comes to topology specifically. Like the density needs to be somewhat equal, or as close to equal as possible between a lot of the shapes, right? Of course, you don't want to add like random geometry where you don't need it, but still, something to keep in mind in general. Right, so I'm not going to have too much to say on this when it comes to proportions. I think you've done a really good job. The scale of this is massive. My main question, looking at your portfolio again, is how The biggest question that I want to pose to you is how are you going to make this game ready? Because there's going to be a lot of work. With micro polygon technology like Nanite, is poly count still really important? Yes, it still is. Even when you tick on Nanite, you still need to have an accurate judgment of where the poly count is going to be. Because there are still significant performance differences between like a raw low poly that you just import, a raw high poly, and an optimized version of that high poly. So yeah, still makes a difference. The application is different, right? Like we're no longer in like, let's say 2016 where we have to like and retopologize everything. That is slowly going away. I mean, in large part it is already gone, but you still need to be very, very careful with your topology. What I was hinting at here, and the reason why I was asking that question is how are you going to make this game ready, is because something like this is gonna need a lot of optimization when it comes to the amount of textures that you're going to be using, the amount of instancing that's going to be happening within like the individual models, the amount of reuse that you're going to be using, right? Like when I talk about reuse, it's more general, but I'm talking trim sheets, tidables, like how are you going to then make it look really pretty, you know, like the whole workflow side of things. That is a massive question for something like this, especially if you want to make this game ready, right? And I think that's what you're trying to do. And that is like, this is the fun stuff. The stuff that we're looking at now, this is fun. This is modeling. We don't have to care about like all the bullshit that comes later on. But I want to already pose a question of like, what, like, yeah, basically game ready, right? Like, how are you going to do that? Because that is the biggest question here, because it's going to be a technical challenge to really find like the right workflows and apply them correctly and all that kind of stuff. How are huge assets textured like this, for example? UDIMs, multiple material slots. It's not going to be UDIMs. UDIMs is a VFX workflow. So we can't really use UDIMs because that's more VFX related. We honestly don't have the texture budget to like throw like 100 UDIMs at something like this. So that's why I'm posing the question, like, okay, we need to use tilables, we need to use trim sheets, and how are these going to be applied then, right? Identify big shapes. Those are going to be tilables. Anything in between is probably going to be trim sheets, I would say, for a lot of this stuff. Let's say you make this gun unique, right? This gun here. That exact gun with the exact same textures, we are probably gonna use here. And then maybe what we can do is make use of, I don't know, let's say a texture variation or something like that. With a texture variation, I mean that if we build up the masks and let's say if we build up the masks with, or like the textural layering with, let's say, sRGB, then with like an RGB mask, right, which is like a packed texture, then you have more flexibility, right? Because you can control those mask values now in the engine. So you could have a dirty gun and a clean gun and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's an example of how you can still use the same textures and the same assets, but then create variation between them, for example. It's going to be crazy. Oh my God, yeah, it is. This is months of work. This is massive. But yeah, that would be, really think about like this step, right? Like the game ready stuff. Yeah, try to plan that out, do early testing, and then see if your workflow is going to be feasible. Because worst case scenario is that, let's say you had this workflow in mind, and then at the end you do some testing, and it's like, oh shit, it doesn't work. Then you have to go back to the drawing board, right? And like redo a bunch of stuff. But yeah. I'm just going to say best of luck, Alessandro. Best of luck. It is an ambitious project, and I'm curious to see how you are going to be building on top of it. So it's okay to create a bunch of material instances to add variation. Yes, but there's a caveat to everything with game art, right? There is going to be a limit to the amount of material instances that you can use on a single asset as well. Especially if we're looking at it in a game context, right? Because let's say this is World of Warships, right? This is one of the warships that is floating on the water. If we have like 10 of them, and let's say each of them has like, I don't know, 200 material instances, right? The game is not going to run. So you need to be very specific and be very mindful of where the camera is going to be. An easy trick, for example, is the guns on the left and the guns on the right, they can probably have the same textures. Because yeah. I was actually planning on, sorry, let me finish my thought. So because the guns on the left and the guns on the right, they can use the same textures because it is highly unlikely that you're ever going to see them in one camera view, right? So in general, that's a good tip. If you want to save resources, you can basically do the same thing with symmetrying your UVs, right? Do it in a place where you can't see the symmetry line. For example, the back of the car, you want to do that unique, but the side of the car, you can symmetry that because you're never going to see it in different angles. And the same can be applied to this boat or anything that you make. You were actually planning on tiling materials in Vertex Paint? It's going to be hard to make those guns look good. And some of the pipes. For the majority of like the framework, right? The actual boat, I think you can use a lot of tiling materials, and I think that's a good plan for, let's say 70 to 80% of the boat is probably going to be tiling in like Vertex Paint, right? And then different tiling materials and all that kind of stuff. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. But I'm worried about like the smaller elements, like the anti-air guns or the bigger guns. Like you're probably gonna want like more detail on those things. And I think there you will need to look into potentially some trims or even going with like a texture atlas or something like that. No? I don't know. That would be my recommendation. But here's the thing. What I want you to do in this case, right? Test your workflow on the most complex elements of your environment or your asset, right? So, for example, if you want to do tiling materials, try your tiling materials on those AA guns because they are like the most complex. And if you can make it work on that, you can make it work on everything else. So that's what I would recommend there. Cool. Thank you. No worries. Modeling is fun until it's time to texture and optimize. I mean, it is usually the workflow that kind of bogs us down, right? It's just all the technical stuff that we have to do to get to the fun stuff. But over time, you know, with more iteration and more confidence in what you're doing, I think the whole pipeline can become fun. It just depends. Like, there's always going to be things that you don't like as much, right? Like, if you ask me to do a prop, then I'm probably not going to like it too much. I can do it for sure, and I'll make it look good, even, you know. But am I really having fun with making a prop? Probably not. I just want to do environment art stuff, man. Come on. Right, last two people. I think. Oh, we have no notes for these people. Okay, let me go in blind then. Discord. Let's have a look. So first, we'll start with Aina. Aina is working on some really cool stuff. Like it. Trying to get a first pass on everything in the scene, really need to add shards of gold, but procrastinating learning how to make something procedurally. I don't imagine it would be that difficult, just need to sit down and do the thing. Yep. Oh, there's no question, Aina? Okay. We'll go with my my impressions then. When it comes to procedural stuff, You can honestly probably do something really quickly with like a fracture node, right? That is honestly not too difficult. Um, and it's honestly more approachable than, I mean, you're doing Houdini already, so I guess you got it to work. Yeah. Cool. But yeah, this is looking really nice. I like it. I like the idea behind it as well. Just having this like mended temple. I really like it. It's like a unique spin on, just like a forest temple. I've been playing a lot of Assassin's Creed Shadows, so this stuff is really cool to see. Um, have a look at their environments. Their environments are gorgeous. But yeah, this is really cool. I like what I'm seeing. I like it a lot. The main thing that I immediately see, the main thing that jumps out to me, is make the architecture like more expressive. More expressive silhouette, That means, especially with these curves, like on like Japanese architecture, right? They're like very expressive in the way that they use their curves. And this is painful, because that immediately makes this modular kit or like this object like way trickier to make, right? Because I don't know if you're doing procedural modeling in Houdini or if you're then importing like a base mesh that you've made and then breaking it up into Houdini. I don't know how that works, but that's what I want to see. Because that can add a lot of power to it. Let's see, but the rest of it looks really, really nice. I like it a lot. So yeah, great stuff. I like it. Yeah, really unique way to like have like a unique influence on the whole environment. It's cool. I like it. Yeah, not too much to add from my side. I'm really curious seeing this grow, right? Because it has a lot of potential. I like the idea behind it. So great stuff. And I'm looking forward to actually seeing what you're going to be producing with your team in the team challenges. We'll be on the lookout. I don't know what team do I mentor again? Oh my god. I don't think it was your team. No, it's not. Okay. Just making sure. My team, team 2. Thanks, Marius. Thanks for the reminder. I mean, I knew this, I knew this. Appreciate it. It's yeah. That's cool. Let's see. Generic Man is asking, have you seen the finals from Embark Studios? The destruction in the game is like sort of the environment artist's role. Even art creators have some crazy unconventional workflow for the environments. Yeah, a lot of that stuff has been, how would you do that stuff? Because a lot of it is real time and reacting to your inputs, right? So there is like a very clever like programmed system in there, right? What my guess would be is that you as an environment artist still supply the materials and probably some of the chunks, right? Because they need something to spawn and to have the destruction settle and all that kind of stuff. So there is still chunks, but when it comes to the bigger sections, that is probably going to be dynamically calculated on runtime, which is like pretty impressive. Our creators has crazy unconventional workflows for their environments. I don't think their workflow is unconventional. I think I don't know. It will be curious to look into it, but my assumption would be that they lean heavily on photogrammetry, right, to get their textures and like their source textures and especially the foliage and like terrain textures and all that kind of stuff. When it comes to the buildings, I'm actually not too sure what they do with that, if it's like pretty traditional or if they have some sort of generators or something like that. But yeah, it is still impressive though. Like, I'm impressed with Embark's with Embark as a studio, the way that they look at workflows and how they can optimize them, there's a lot of pretty cool stuff happening. I think I've read that they also they heavily use Houdini, right? Which makes sense. And I think they have a built-in system, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think they have a system where they can use raw scanned data and then they run it through like Houdini pipeline and it basically spits out like a low poly that's usable. I think. It probably depends on which asset you throw in there, right? Because that output is going to be oh yeah, right, they use geodata. Yeah. But that is not something new. Like a lot of games use that these days. Like actual geodata. Which is still cool, right? Don't get me wrong. It is still cool and it makes a lot of sense. Because I think their latest map was like inspired by Italy, right? And it just literally took a chunk from Italy and then just like, cool, that's ours now. And then you just built and sculpt on top of it. That makes a lot of sense to me. What I was gonna say, Embark is a studio that I look at because they do a bunch of interesting time optimized things and they invest heavily in tooling, which is really, really interesting to see. And I think that would sort of be my future vision of what smaller studios are going to be looking like. They're going to follow, they're going to do their own version of that, right? Just from the ground up, like, hey, what tools do we need? Like, how do we make environments? How can we quicker build them from scratch? How can we work more lean with less people, right? And that usually means leaning more on tools and automated things rather than you sitting down and like tinkering on a single prop for like a couple of weeks, because that just doesn't make sense if you then, I don't know, have like hundreds of props to do for like a single game. Timeline wise, that makes less and less sense, right? That's why I really look forward to seeing reveals of like more scrappy AA kind of I mean, not AA in this case, but like I guess like AAA new studios that are really trying to look at the whole process and rethink how it can be done from scratch. I think it's really interesting because they have a really solid team there. Like the technical people to like the artists, like they're doing some really, really cool stuff. And this is from a person who hasn't played a single game, right? I just look at it from the workflow and the visuals from like the outside, and I'm already impressed. Right. Last person for today. So we have Stargazing. Working on the scene, I really love it. I want to make it very beautiful with a festive feeling, but I can clearly see a problem with the lighting and I'm kind of stuck. I would really love to hear your opinions, just not just about the lighting. Yeah. I think the main issue that I see if we zoom on this is a lot of it is the same. The same in terms of values. There's no real depth to it. Nothing really stands out. And it's just, that is what's making the whole thing kind of just, the feeling that you get is that you don't know where to look. So we need to put balance on the table and a bit more contrast. So a couple of things to do, and you can actually look at, it's very subtle, but you can actually look at the way that they do this in the concept. If you look here, you can see that there's like a subtle fog. And that helps with diffusing some of the intensity and the saturation of some of the colors there, right? Which makes it so that like the thing that they want you to look at, like this central column, stands out a bit more, right? So that is actually one tool that we can use. We can also use like very slight fog to add like a little bit of depth to it, right? And that's definitely what I would recommend here, because that's a big issue right now. There's no atmospheric fog, so there's no depth to the whole scene. So we need to create depth. First thing would be, let me spell that. Atmospheric fog. Right? And then also what we want to do is we want to have something that we can control ourselves as an artist. For that, we can use fog sheets or fog cards. cards. What these are just like little planes with like a fog texture on it, you know, like just a little cloud. Whee! And you can drag them into your scene and just like place them in areas where you want like, I don't know, you want to fade things out just a little bit, right? But it adds like a nice separation to things. For example, what you could do is if you want to highlight this shape, you can then add like a fog card, like literally behind it, and that is going to push the shape more into the front. I'll give you an example of what this can look like. I bring up his work quite a lot, but the work from Otto Ostera is like my go-to for stuff like this. So let me switch it up to the main screen. So if we look at this, for example, if there wasn't fog or any sort of like mist behind this wall would blend in with the colors of the background, right? But because we have the separation of like a little bit of a fog behind it, it reads really clearly that this is like the first layer, separation, and then the second layer, right? It's a way to separate different layers in your scene from each other. And he uses this everywhere, right? Like the castle itself, that is also surrounded by just like clouds and fog and all that kind of stuff to separate this hill from the rest of the scene, right? So very effective. You can even see that here. Very deliberate with how he uses like the fog here to make this silhouette and this little hill stand out a bit more, right? So going back to what you were doing, that is what you can use in your work as well. Like try to be your application is going to be way more subtle than what he does, right? Because you don't have a lot of depth to the scene, but you can still use it in a very specific way. Next thing, what can also happen with what can also help with the depth here is lighting. Contrast, I would say. Some people are already mentioning this, but if you look at your lighting, right, all the emissive things in your scene, they have the same value. And we're gonna do like a quick test here. Where is it? Is it this guy? I'm going to do a quick example. So if we if we do this and then we do the inverse to some of the other areas, you're going to see what this does like almost immediately. Right? So, oh, maybe I should set this to highlights. And then we can basically start applying that in a lot of areas if you wanted to. And you might be looking at this and you're like, huh, what the hell changed, you know? And then we can show you. It's very subtle. But you can see that if we switch it on and off, that it's pushing our attention more towards the center, right? Very subtle stuff. But you can go in with like, I would literally go to every balloon and say like, hey, this balloon, less important now. These balloons in the middle, pretty important. So we are gonna increase the intensity of those, increase the intensity of like all the stuff in the center. And then we can kind of look at it again, right? And this might be a bit too harsh, right? But you have more control in Unreal. You can kind of switch that to where it makes sense, right? Something like this, probably. And then you can decide, right? Like the way that I would do this is, okay, so we talked about lighting, and this is usually what's referred to as like a hierarchy, right? Well, first, actually, this is more of a focal point, right? Because we only focused on one area. The next thing what I want to talk about is a hierarchy. What I mean with hierarchy is deciding like, okay, I'm going to decide that this thing over here is going to be number one priority, right? Priority number one. Cool. So that's where I want to see that's where I want to be drawn to immediately, right? And then you can decide like, okay, but I also want you to look here, which is cool, right? We don't want to only focus on one thing. But let's say this is number 2, and then, I don't know, let's say this is number 3, right? Now we have a hierarchy established where this needs to be the brightest point, or the most contrasted point. This needs to be taking attention, and then the rest of it can be balanced in accordance to how it relates to the main one. So if I switch this back on, number 1 is going to be the point that is probably going to have the strongest emissive values, right? Still within reason, but you make those lights the most interesting and you make the colors the most pop, right? Then we move down to 2 and you move the intensity of the emissive up, but not as much as number 1. You want to have a clear separation between the two where I can see immediately, oh, number 1 is where I focus first, and then my eye wanders off to 2 and then maybe goes to 3 and 4 or whatever, right? But we need to be able, as environment artists, we need to be able to decide where you're focusing first, right? So that's also with lighting, and well, lighting in this case and contrast. And don't be afraid to add like specific lights, right? So for example, if you want to add like a bit more light onto this section, what you can do is you can have like, I don't know, you can have like almost like a, what would I do? You can almost have like a rectangular light that is kind of just like casting down onto that area to kind of light it up just a little bit, to kind of give it that pop, right? But you can be very specific where you put lights and then you balance them according to this hierarchy. Right. I'm going to keep it to those two. I think those are definitely the ones that you want to begin with, right? So that we can decide on, okay, this is important. I'm going to focus here. We're going to do a quick little exercise, right? Because this is fun. Nope, not that one. So again, if we decide like, okay, main point, I want you to focus on that first. So then we're going to be saying like, okay, we're going to boost all this stuff up. And then I'm going to reduce some of this stuff back here. And then we can say, okay, I want to now also accentuate like a little area here. And maybe a little area here. And then, I don't know, maybe this little area can be accentuated. But you're being very deliberate with where we put the attention now, right? Then again, constantly going back and forth with being like, maybe this is still like a bit too intense. Or maybe, I don't know, let's try to push this up a bit more. This is what I like, right? You can really start painting with light in this way. And then what if we do something like this? Last thing that I'll show you is if we take those two things, we take those two examples, and then we literally turn them into black and white. Give me a second. So we group this, we group that, we rasterize, and then we rasterize. This is what's going to happen when, and this is actually showcasing that I can even go darker in certain areas if I wanted to. But this is literally what happens when we do this, right? Like subconsciously, this is a good way of looking at this. We strip away all the color and we just focus on the values of things, right? So you can kind of see that what I did was like, I tried to increase the contrast of some of the values. And again, this is maybe a bit too much, but you have more control in Unreal than I do here, right? Yeah. So it's that contrast between different areas that is going to help you make things stand out and help you create a focus in your scene. And that together with the atmospherics that you're going to be putting in, like little fog sheets, like atmospheric fog, like all those things, that's going to help a lot. I can guarantee it. Cool. But thank you, Stargazing. And also thank you, Eden, for helping out with the feedback as well. That's really appreciated. Right. And that was it for this event. I am not going to make it any longer than it needs to be because I had a fucking busy week. I think the busiest week I've had in a while. I know that I say this every time, but I'm going to chill out for a bit, probably play some more Assassin's Creed and stuff. And we will see each other Friday. Yeah, Friday I'll be back for some more portfolio reviews. So we'll be back at 12 GMT plus 1. That's the time zone that I'm in, I guess. But yeah, I'll send out more announcements for that soon. So I will see you then. And I wish you all a nice evening and a lot of fun working on your projects. Bye-bye.